I moved into the apartment on a quiet Sunday afternoon. The building was old but clean, with long corridors and thin walls. People nodded politely but didn't stop to talk. Everyone seemed to know each other already, except me. That was when I noticed my neighbor across the hall. He was a man in his late 40s, tall, always neatly dressed. He opened his door only when necessary and closed it quickly. When we met in the hallway, he smiled gently and said hello, but never more than that. No visitors ever came to his apartment. One evening, while taking out the trash, an elderly woman from downstairs whispered, "That's the quiet one. You should be careful." Another neighbor laughed and added, "He keeps to himself for a reason." I asked what they meant, but they avoided my eyes and changed the subject. Still, nothing about him felt dangerous. He held the elevator door for me once. Another time, he helped me carry groceries without saying a word. But something felt off. Not frightening, just sad. Late one night, I stood by my window and noticed a light across the hall. His curtain was slightly open. Inside, I saw him sitting on the floor, surrounded by photographs. His hands were shaking. The next morning, curiosity followed me downstairs. Near the entrance, a group of neighbors were talking, quietly but with strong voices. When my neighbor's name came up, the mood changed. "He wasn't always like this," one man said. "The police came here years ago," another added. "Something happened. A woman disappeared." No one explained further. Later that day, I saw my neighbor at the local grocery store. He stood patiently in line, eyes lowered, holding only a loaf of bread and milk. When the cashier noticed his name on the card, her smile faded. She didn't say anything rude, but she didn't speak kindly either. Behind him, people whispered. He paid quickly and left without looking back. That night, I tried to convince myself it wasn't my business. Everyone had a past. Everyone carried something. But just after midnight, a sound pulled me from sleep. At first, I thought it was the wind. Then I realized it was crying, soft, broken, coming from the apartment across the hall. I sat up in bed, my heart heavy. Whatever people believed about my neighbor, I was starting to think the truth was far more complicated. The crying didn't stop. After a few minutes, I heard a loud sound, something heavy hitting the floor, then silence. I didn't think. I grabbed my keys and ran across the hall. I knocked once. No answer. I knocked again, harder. Still nothing. My heart racing, I tried the door. It was unlocked. Inside, the apartment was dark. A lamp lay broken on the floor. Near the sofa, my neighbor was collapsed, one hand clutching his chest, his face pale. "I'm here," I said quickly. "Can you hear me?" His eyes opened slowly. I called for help and stayed beside him until the ambulance arrived. He never once pushed me away. When they took him, he held my wrist tightly, like he was afraid I might disappear. Later that night, the doctor said it was exhaustion and stress. Nothing permanent, but close. When I returned to the building, dawn was breaking. A few days later, I knocked on his door again. This time, he opened it fully. "Thank you," he said. His voice was weak but steady. Most people wouldn't have come. I didn't know what to say. He looked at me carefully, then spoke quietly. "You don't know why they hate me," he said, "and maybe you should." He invited me inside. For the first time, I saw his home properly, clean, simple, and filled with photographs. In many of them, he stood beside a young woman and a small boy. "They think I did something terrible," he began, "but they never asked me what really happened. Years ago, he had been accused when a woman disappeared from the neighborhood. The police questioned him. People whispered, but there was no proof, only suspicion. The truth is," he said slowly, "she ran away. The woman had been trapped in a violent marriage. One night, she came to him for help. He gave her money, a place to rest, and helped her leave the city safely. When her husband reported her missing, the blame fell on him. I could have told everything," he said, "but if I did, he would have found her. So he stayed silent. He accepted the looks, the distance, the hatred, to protect her and her child." I felt my chest tighten. "There were messages," he added quietly. "Letters, proof." He looked at me with tired eyes. "But if the truth comes out," he said, "an innocent family will suffer." And suddenly, I understood. The truth was real, but it was dangerous. After that conversation, everything felt heavier. When I walked through the building, people spoke more openly now. Someone had seen the ambulance. Someone else had noticed me visiting his apartment. The whispers were no longer quiet. "He's finally being exposed," one neighbor said. That night, I found a small suitcase outside his door. He was leaving. "I don't want more trouble," he told me calmly. "This place remembers things I'd rather forget." "But you did nothing wrong," I said. He gave a tired smile. "Doing the right thing doesn't always look right to others." I went back to my apartment and sat in silence. I thought about the letters he showed me, the messages, the truth that could clear his name and hurt someone else. For days, I did nothing. Then I saw the young boy in one of the photographs. I remembered how my neighbor spoke about protecting him, and I realized something painful. Staying silent now was no longer protection. It was permission. I went to the building manager and asked for a meeting. Not just with him, but with everyone. When I knocked on my neighbor's door that evening, I said only one thing: "I'm going to speak." He closed his eyes. "I was afraid you would," he whispered. Downstairs, voices were already gathering. The meeting room was full. People sat with crossed arms, ready to judge. Some avoided looking at my neighbor. Others stared openly. I stood up first. "I want to tell you why you think he's dangerous," I said, "and why you're wrong." The room went silent. I explained everything: the woman who escaped violence, the child who needed protection, the choice my neighbor made to stay quiet so they could stay safe. Then he stood up. With shaking hands, he placed letters on the table. Dates, addresses, proof. No excuses, no anger, just truth. Some people looked ashamed. Others looked confused. A few stayed silent, unable to accept what they had believed for years. The manager cleared his throat. "There is no reason for this man to leave." No one argued. As we walked out, someone softly said, "I'm sorry." It wasn't loud, but it mattered. My neighbor didn't leave. Life didn't suddenly become warm and friendly, but it became human. People began to greet him again, slowly, carefully. Some never did, and that was okay. The truth doesn't fix everything, but it changes the direction. I learned how easily people believe a story when it saves them from thinking deeply, how quickly silence can turn into punishment, and how powerful it is when one person decides to listen. My neighbor still keeps to himself, but now, when he smiles, it reaches his eyes. As for me, I learned that courage isn't always loud. Sometimes it's standing up in a quiet room and saying, "You're wrong." We don't need to know everything about our neighbors, but we owe them something simple: the chance to be heard.